When I was a freshman in high school, my first high school basketball practice was with the varsity team, and it did not go well. See, as a freshman, I was definitely not a varsity basketball player, but it was October and the football season was still going. Team was pretty good. They were making a long playoff run, and a lot of our best basketball players were also the best football players. And so I found myself in varsity basketball practice just to be an extra body to play in the scrimmages. And it was a rude awakening for me. So it started out on a rocky note when the very first part of practice was going to be this scrimmage. And coach was calling out the people who were going to be his first team on the scrimmage. And to my shock, as he was calling out the people for the scrimmage, he said, "And Stephen, get out here." And he was looking straight at me. And so, me wanting to please the coaches and really making a good impression, I sprinted out onto the court. I was ready. I got into my defensive stance and I looked up and saw everybody was looking at me with this puzzled look. And then coach said, "The other Stephen," and pointed with his hand to the person who was standing behind me, a 6'10" transfer student who I learned that day was also named Stephen. So that made a lot more sense, but I had to just lower my head and walk back to the baseline. And as I did, I looked over down the way and saw my brother's face, my older brother who was already on the varsity team. And the look on his face was like, "What are you thinking, man? Putting yourself out there on the first team." So that was a pretty bad start. But then at the end, things got even worse because as we finished practice, we were doing something, a real classic basketball drill called the 3-man weave. And we were doing this to determine if we were going to have to do wind sprints to finish off the practice. So the 3-man weave, if you're not familiar, is this age-old basketball drill, which is designed to have people making these passes and cuts and in perfect synchronicity. And so they can go all the way down the court without dribbling the ball and make a layup. And the whole team was involved in this drill, and we were supposed to do 10 perfect 3-man weaves in order to finish practice and not have to do sprints at the end. Well, our team did it. We did 9 perfect 3-man weaves, but on the 10th time, some freshman named Stephen missed the final layup, causing the entire team to have to do sprints to finish practice. And man, I still remember that moment, thinking in my mind, you're never going to live this down. You're always going to be the person in everybody's mind who's remembered for this. They're never going to pick you to play basketball again. For the rest of your life, you're going to be known as that other Stephen who can't make a layup. It was not a good feeling. Of course, I came to realize as the days passed that things that we think in the moment are going to define us forever usually don't turn out to do that. And even though some of my friends still gave me a hard time about that terrible first day in practice, I was able to move on with my life and be more or less okay. But it did get me thinking about the importance of how we are known. In our lives, a lot of time we spend a lot of thought and a lot of energy into the ways that we are known. And as we take a moment and get into our Bible discussion today, I think it could be good for our groups to spend some time talking about that. How important is it to you that you be known a certain way or that you have a certain reputation? What are some of the ways that you hope that you might be known? Or, of course, if you've got a story like I do, a little story of how you were known when you were younger, a nickname people called you, or some story that you thought was going to define your life forever, feel free to share that with your group too. But as we get started, let's just get to talking with one another about the importance of how we are known. Let's discuss together as a group. Well, as you know, this year in our community groups, we have been talking about and are going to be talking about all season long about the letter that Paul wrote called 1 Thessalonians. And in the first chapter of 1 Thessalonians, one of the very first things we learn is the reputation of this little congregation in northern Greece in the town of Thessalonica. What we learn is what this church was known for. In fact, we see a little bit of that in verse 8. One of the things we learn, verse 7 and verse 8, is that this little congregation in Macedonia became an example to all the believers throughout Macedonia, and it says in Achaia, one of the other neighboring regions in Greece. They became this example, as so much so that verse 8, their faith in God had become so widely known that Paul says we don't even need to speak about it. It was that widely known. And one of the things we're going to see as we get a little further into this chapter is that it was known in a good way. People can have reputations that are either good or bad, but these Thessalonian Christians were known for their faith in a good way. And we're about to see why. But before we even get into what this passage says, the reasons why were for Thessalonica, I wonder if we could spend some time talking in our groups about this. If you, in terms of your faith as an individual, or if we, in terms of our church family, could be widely known for something good, what kinds of things would that be? Like, what would be some of the best things that we as a church or we as individuals could be widely known for? Let's talk about that together. So I would be curious to know if any of the things you just discussed in your groups have something to do with what Paul says about the Thessalonian Christians. Because when Paul is praising this congregation for the way that they are known, their good reputation throughout all of the area surrounding them, it really boils down to one thing. He praises the Thessalonians because they made faith and action a dynamic duo in their congregation. They put faith and action together. It was not as though they simply talked about things but did not do them. It was not as though they simply adopted beliefs in their minds but then never actually showed them in the way that they lived. Instead, they took their faith and set it to work. This is exactly what Paul says in the beginning of the letter when he's talking about how many reasons he has to remember this church that he's helped plant so fondly and remember them before God in prayer. He says that he remembers them before God, verse 3, because of their work of faith and their labor of love and their steadfastness of hope in our Lord Jesus Christ. Now notice those phrases, work of faith and labor of love. Those are phrases that set faith and that set love in active terms. It's faith that is set to work toward a goal. It is love that is laboring to accomplish something good. And this is what defines the Thessalonians and makes their faith stand out. It's because it's faith set into action. And that is why they have such a profound and good reputation in their community. So for our last discussion today, I'd like for us to think about that and apply it to our own lives. When it comes to making faith and action a dynamic duo in our lives of faith and for our church, where are some areas that we can work on that a little more? What are some of the areas where we're thriving at that right now? And what sort of difference could it make if we made faith and action a dynamic duo in our lives? Let's discuss one more time with these things. Well, I hope that as we wrap things up today, you will remember that what we are known for as Christians really matters. Because it is not just our own name that we wear. As Christians, we wear the name of Christ as our own to go out into the world and represent Christ to others. And so it matters how the name of Christ is known. And by putting our faith into action, making faith and action a dynamic duo in our lives of faith, we can help to ensure that Christ's reputation is upheld for all of the loving and good and compassionate and wonderful things that we know ought to be associated with him, because we've experienced those things in our own lives too. So I hope that you will take the name of Christ and remember that you are carrying it with you as you go about this week. And I hope we can all be challenged to carry it well.